Do you think that we ought to?
Oh, I love the look. I just love the
I
look.
wonder if I can make Waynette a co-host. If I make Waynette, can we have more than one co-host? Anybody know? Anybody?
I don't know about the webinars. We do a lot of rooms, not so many webinars.
I am, okay, I'll tell you what. I'm going to go back on that. Why don't we bring them in now?
Yeah, and then everybody says hello when we do that. Yeah.
But it seems to me that they're already starting to come in. So, okay. Promote to panelist. Anissa.
Hi, Cheryl. Oh, one good note though for everybody. One of the ways that we try to avoid over moderation, like I would rather not be like, and this person, is just if somebody unmutes, we kind of all get an idea that that person's got something to say. And, you know, if we need to text each other to make sure, you know, maybe somebody missed that somebody has something to say, whatever, we'll do that. But if we can kind of rule of thumb it, like turn off mute if you're ready to say something and pay attention when somebody else does, you know, that we can kind of start there.
So without moderation, can we go to the extremes?
I think
that's how extreme we're going to be today, Zaman.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
the innocence of Will. He's like, I'm just going to apologize in advance. We're sorry.
Waynette,
oh my
take
gosh.
a look at the attendees and see if there's anybody that I missed.
What?
Take a look at the attendees and see if there's anybody else I missed.
There were Jordan, Julia, Kate's here. Michael, Patricia.
If they're
no, not yet.
If they're on the attendees list, I want to take them off and put them in here.
No, understood. No, you haven't missed anyone as of yet.
Okay, good. Excellent. Now.
And Will, I'm okay with you doing my introduction. Where'd Will go? Where'd he go?
He's hiding out in the middle row.
Now I got to move him back up here. I got to move my squares around a little bit.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we let, because what we normally do is the panelist introductions and then landing on the presenter for the evening. So why don't we, Dana, when you hand it, I don't know if you go, yeah, why don't you hand it to me, then I'll send it around the room. And then when everybody's gone, I'll introduce Waynette and we'll get started from there.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Different Julia, Vanessa.
All right. So what we want everybody to do right now is everybody that's on the panel, please mute yourselves. And what we want to do that for is so that while I'm opening the Myth Salon, it doesn't cut away to somebody who is just slapping something on their desk or having a dog bark in the background or a car go by. All right, like that, Will. So we want to mute you. All right. Okay, so. All right, I think we're ready to go. We are recording, AJ's all set. Welcome everyone. My name is Dana White. Well, today we have a really extra special Myth Salon. And I say extra special because among other things, we have the continued coronavirus crisis that continues to take hold of the country. But we have weather. I mean, in the South, we've lost our panelist and friend, Dennis Slattery, tonight. He's got a foot of snow in his house and they may lose power and the pipes are freezing. And they're not set up for that. So what I'd like to do tonight, we have Waynette Brock from I've forgotten it. She'll introduce herself when it comes up there. A powerful woman, beautiful group. This group is called Raw and Uncut. And I was brought into this group maybe 4 or 5 months ago by my good friend, Jonathan Staggers, with whom I've been doing the Tao Te Ching recordings, which, by the way, we have just passed the 2/3 mark. We have uploaded number 54 out of 81. And what a wonderful reception these are engendering in the community. So what I'd like to do is open up right now and let's have a quick moment of silence for the difficulties that we're facing in the country today and that the people in the South are having with their weather. So. Now, as is my normal routine, I usually start off with a poem. And I encountered through my other friend on the panel today, Wally, this particular video that I want to share. So I'm going to screen share, and it takes about 2 minutes to play this, but it's pretty powerful.
On June 17th, 2015, Dylan Ruff walked into a midweek Bible study. He sat and prayed with the church members before pulling out his gun, killing most, and allowing one to live. After the incident, he was found and arrested peacefully. When Dylan Ruff killed 9 innocent Black people, we did not question his God. He wore flags of apartheid Africa. We did not question his allegiance. He committed the crime alone. We did not question his people. When Adam Lanza shot a classroom full of first graders at Sandy Hook Elementary, we did not ask him to leave the country. When Timothy McVeigh killed 168 people in Oklahoma, we did not call this a crime against every American. When the KKK killed thousands of Black people, while swearing to uphold Christian morality, we did not ask them to remove their robes. We did not call all Christians bigots. Do you see it? How we don't label all white men based on the sins of a few, do you see it? How we don't have to condemn a whole class of people based on the actions of some, do you see it? How all the names are different, how all the faces are different, how all the people are different, therefore, we should not condemn all Muslims for the radicalism of a group. If you want to persecute ISIS, go ahead, but to persecute ISIS is to persecute those that gave them power. To persecute those that gave them power is to persecute the US government. Do your research. Islam is not synonymous with terror. It is literally submission, it is devotion, it is peace. Terrorism is actually forbidden, and jihad does not mean holy war. It means struggle, it means survival, it means standing face to face with everything that wants to put you in the ground and choosing to be alive. Do your research and stop listening to CNN. Stop trading humanity for hypocrisy. Stop staring at Muslims in the airport. Stop letting your fear drag you into ignorance. Stop supporting billionaire Republicans who want to scare you into murdering the innocent, and start supporting leaders who speak peace in their native tongue. Instead of burning down the mosque, burn down the walls around the pulsating muscle in your chest and realize that we all have one. And lastly, as the customary greeting goes, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Wa alaikum assalam, and upon you be peace. Do you see it?
First time I saw that, I was just blown away by the performance aspects of it, but also just the dynamic message that it points out that, you know, it's hard to talk about race without talking about privilege. And it's hard to talk about privilege without talking about entitlement. And I think this is something that, particularly if you're a white guy in this culture, it's something that you really have to confront head on. So I'm extremely grateful today that Waynette and the Raw and Uncut group made the decision to join us today in the Myth Salon, because it'll be fresh, it'll be unique, and we don't know where it's going, but we don't know where anything is going. So let's just go with the flow. All right. Will, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Dana, and for sharing that poem. Well, really looking forward to an incredible evening. And before we get started, as we get started, I just want to thank everybody that's been following along with Myth House and checking out some of the stuff we've posted this month, and checked out our mythology portals on Myths of February, Holidays of February, Black History Month, African mythology. It's all gone up in the last, since the start of the year. So we're excited about what's going on, and I wanted to invite, we're testing a new feature tonight on our own, just kind of on the side. But if any of you are interested in trying out that test with us, it's going to be a very experimental night on lots of levels. It seems AJ will post that link in the thread, and would love for any of y'all willing to check that out to do so. But no need, just anybody who's interested and wants to help us test the thing out. Getting into tonight, as Dana has said, I mean, this has been, we continue the conversation that we had last time with Clyde Ford, and into, of course, this month, and into, of course, I think we're coming on just about 12 months in the coronavirus atmosphere. So hopefully this is all driving us towards some deeper considerations and deeper thoughts about what our world is and where we should be going. And hopefully this is a time, as we start to come out of COVID or start to imagine it, that we're imagining our way into that future and not just focusing on what we're letting go of. So with that, we're going to try something new. Speaking of letting go, typically I'll go around the room and I'll introduce everybody and all the panelists and name a bunch of titles and all the wonderful, glorious things that everyone's done. And we were talking about doing that before we got started. And it was suggested that that might not be as consistent with the paradigm that we're trying to encourage tonight. So what we're going to do is just going to go around the room, and people will introduce themselves, just say a quick hello. And then once we've gotten through everybody, then I will introduce Waynette and we'll get started for the evening. I don't think we all have the same sequence, so I'm not quite sure. I think though, we might have the same panelist sequence. So with that, let me invite Anissa, and hopefully after that, Cheryl and Coretta. Hopefully y'all all have the same sequence to say hello.
Okay, my name is Anissa. I'm from Northern Virginia. I work as a peer recovery specialist. I'm here tonight with Raw and Uncut, and I'm happy for the invitation. I look forward to this space that we're going to be sharing tonight and all the wonderful discussions we'll be having.
And I'm Cheryl, and I'm from Florida. So we do have the good weather, I have to say. I love to do volunteer work, specifically in nursing homes. I haven't been able to do that for quite a while, but that is my passion. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to having some real conversations tonight. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name's Coretta Alexander, and I'm calling from Olivehurst, California, which is north of Sacramento. And I am on part of the board of directors with Waynette with One New Heartbeat, and happy to be part of the Raw and Uncut series. Thanks for having me.
Now we've been switching our names around here, I see, but can we go Jonathan, Selena, Stephanie?
Right, I'm Jonathan, and I'm in Menlo Park. And my heart is open. I was touched very deeply, Wally. And I feel very raw. And I'm grateful to be here tonight to be with everyone.
And I'm Selena Matthews, and I'm thrilled to be a part of the Smith Salon, and specifically, seeing all these new faces and what we can conjure and grow with. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, and I am so grateful to be here tonight. I work with mental health and recovery here, and I am very interested in diversity. So I will be interested in your perspectives. Thank you for having me join.
And my name is Torrin Osberg. I am name's not a coincidence. I'm Stephanie Osberg's husband. I've been blessed with being able to explore this world that we've been creating in this Raw and Uncut group. And I've been enjoying every single minute of it. And thank you all for having me here tonight.
Voris, we got you muted.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Voris Nunley. I'm part of the Myth Salon group, which I find to be a wonderful space. I'm a professor at University of California, Riverside, and I teach rhetoric, literature, and language. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
And Wally and Zaman, and then there are two others of you that are operating under Waynette aliases, it looks like. Would love to hear from y'all too.
Wali, Muta Zamil. I'm a servant. I'm committed to human dignity, human consciousness, and I'm grounded in being a cosmic child. I'm honored to be here with friends and family. I pass the mic.
Good evening. This is Zaman Stanizai. I'm with Pacifica Graduate Institute, and I'm so very, very happy to be part of this diversity and to add to it. And I look forward to a very colorful, and I mean that in a very meaningful way, a very colorful discussion to see diverse perspectives, so we can paint a picture from different colors, because if we were all the same color, there won't be no painting of a picture to look at.
And I see two more Waynette Brocks. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
I guess I'll go next. My name is actually Devonna Jones, and I am here with my mother, who's actually Waynette Brock. So I'm glad to be here. I'm excited about what you guys are doing here and can't wait to just be a part of the journey and the conversation. Thank you.
Hey, Waynette number 3 down there.
Would you like to say hello?
That would be Brad William.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Well, that's really, thank you, everyone. It was wonderful to.
He's trying to unmute himself.
Aha.
Brad Special. Unmute yourself and say hello.
Hello.
Hi, Brad.
Hey.
Well, this is the fullest screen we've had since Christmas. So this is awesome. Hello, everyone. Eager to get started. It's my honor to get to introduce Waynette tonight. Waynette Brock is a CEO of One New Heartbeat, which is a 501c3 CBO that has provided breaking barriers to build bridges through their Last Chance initiative. Identifying and healing from intergenerational and personal trauma, reentry, mentoring, HCV, HIV education, as well as wellness and recovery training and support to individuals in San Mateo County for 13 years. She's personally conducted wellness and recovery groups in San Mateo County corrections facilities for 8 years and currently facilitates 7 online wellness support groups each week that are open to the public. One New Heartbeat, under her direction, provides staff training, consultation, and technical support to SM, COs, CBOs, ONHBs. Also provides support groups and resources to San Mateo County residents that are affected by trauma, addictions, incarceration, and life-threatening illnesses. And somehow, all of Ms. Brock's and One New Heartbeat services and support are provided at no charge to the clients. It's an honor to introduce you tonight, Waynette. Really looking forward to the conversation. And I know that it'll be a lively one and a very fresh one with a whole bunch of new voices that haven't been with us before. So looking forward to finding our center together. Thanks for joining us tonight, Waynette.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having us. I don't know the format, so you gotta kind of tell me what's next. Here comes Jeff. I know that's Jeff. I just know it's Jeff.
So here, so would love for you to introduce, some of your conversation and where you'd like to get us started, and then I'm sure we'll all respond and we'll be rolling.
All right. Jeffrey, is that you that just joined? If you care to introduce yourself, there he is.
No, my name is Waynette Brock. It's a pleasure to meet everybody. I'm Jeff Essex out here in California.
Oh, good Lord. Buckle up, people. Welcome. So we, when Dana invited me to participate as a panelist, and I've joined the Myth Salon like a couple of times. I've come in to see what you guys were talking about, what you were doing. And sometimes it's like it was a little bit over, and I was like, well, let me see. I talked to Dana and I was like, we're just going to bring Raw and Uncut to the Myth Salon, and give people a little glimpse into, what we are doing to be the change that we want to see in the world, what it is we are doing and how we're connecting with each other to directly impact change in our local communities, but most importantly, how we're doing the work, the internal work, peeling back those different layers, discovering what our biases are, where are our prejudices, how is it that we have these belief systems that we've bought into or that we're taking on that impacts how we treat each other in the world. So, before we get started, I just want to invite everyone into the process of having these brave space conversations. And the reason we call them brave space conversations is because a lot of times things will bubble up to the surface, things that we, hadn't been aware of. I don't want to call it unconscious bias because everybody has biases and everybody has prejudices based on their lived experiences, right? But sometimes when that bubbles up to the surface, at least for me, it causes me discomfort. And so the invitation is simply to lean into the discomfort as you're becoming aware of self and the biases and prejudices that show up in our lives and in our worlds, most importantly in our thoughts. For me, it's not people, places, things, and situations that have the most power over me. It's the internal dialogue I have with myself, right? It's the voice that doesn't even have a sound that impacts me the most, if that makes sense. So, yeah, these aren't easy conversations, but we really just want to, look at it and have the opportunity to have grace for ourselves, respect for each other, and opportunity, again, to become the change that we would like to see in the world. So, I don't know where Dana went. Dana!
Yes.
I don't know where Miss Ellen is, but Miss Ellen will be coming in just to give us a little blurb, and then she has to jot right out.
Right.
But if you could support me by the slides.
You got it.
And I'm not going to talk you guys to death because I hate lectures and I'm not going to do lectures. But I created a couple of talking points and some slides, and this comes from the Microaggressions and Becoming Cultural Responsive curriculum that we developed a couple of years ago, but we've had to tweak it and make adjustments due to current circumstances. And so there's just a couple of talking points I have here, and then I really want to pull Brad into this and Anissa into this because they have great perspectives on beliefs, values, and practice, as well as, defining race and so on and so forth.
How do I get this to full screen?
You can go to slideshow.
All right. But that is slideshow.
And play from start.
Play from start.
Yes,
there
sir.
It is. Look at that. All
Bam!
Right. Working with
Woo-hoo!
pros. It is
We're
such
on
a
a roll
pleasure.
now. And I invite anyone to jump in at any time if there's anything that speaks to your heart, and you have a perspective that you want to share, just jump on in. Will, is there a raise hand feature or something?
Yeah, or if you notice that somebody's unmuted, you might recognize it. But typically we kind of let you get through your thing, and then we can kind of all respond. But if you want to invite people in, then sure, raise hands, and we'll be attentive to it.
All right, well, I can't see. I'm a little older than you. It's a good.
I'll look for a raised hand. I'll let you know.
That'd be very supportive. Thank you. So next slide, please, Dana. We talked about brave space conversations. So before we jump into this stuff, I'd like everyone to utilize the chat box if you choose to. Choices and options. Participation is always voluntary. There's an important topic that we'd like to initiate, and that is what comprises culture. So culture can be conceptualized and defined differently depending upon one's worldview. So I'm just asking if people could, in the chat box, or if you're in the panel, you can unmute yourself. How do you define culture? What does culture mean to you? What's your perspective? And again, Will, if you choose to read what's in the chat box, that would be supportive because I cannot see it.
I'm not sure that you can get the chat box in.
Oh, I'll see if anybody shoots something in the chat. I will see it for sure.
Oh, you will. Okay. Even when we're screen sharing?
Yeah, you won't see it, Dana, but Will can see it.
Oh, I got you.
Sure do wish that some of my anthropology students were in the room. This was on their test this week.
Oh, are you a teacher?
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. Myth, anthropology, philosophy, and they should have been responding with linguistics and talking about how culture is encoded in language and language and culture. And we've got Kate Loftus over here saying that culture is music, art, clothing, language, and media.
Thank you, Katie. Katie is our CFO, Chief Financial Officer of One New Heartbeat. Thank you for joining.
And Carol is adding that the interaction of belief systems and creativity, culture is the interaction of belief systems and creativity in an organized group. And food, Sonia adds.
Nice.
I like that addition about food.
Wally, beliefs, traditions, education, family, art, language, commerce, and food, a recurring theme. And from Rob, on a nerdy word basis, culture could be analogous to starter. I don't know that word. Batch for sourdough bread. Culture, like right.
Culture.
Like a culture, yeah. Deborah, it's a construct based on a set of beliefs, and Tatiana, a way of living, a way of being, a way of thinking. Brad, joy, culture, what I live and grow in.
I think what people are saying is that it's complicated, it's complex, it's not simple, it's not one thing, it's many things. And it also seems to be an organism. It's alive.
Boris is adding beliefs, practices, worldviews, and conflicting realities. Conflicting realities, yeah.
Yeah.
Structured way of looking at life, an unbelievable open way of looking at life. It has the full range.
A tapestry of traditions and beliefs that are woven together and handed down from generation to generation that a common group of people share.
So it's tradition, you're saying, Anissa.
Traditions and beliefs. And it's a tapestry of them. They're all interwoven together, handed down from generation to generation. And it's a common group of people. And the group of people, it can be based on geography. It could be based on any kind of commonality, because you can have culture in any kind of structural group, like a family. You have family culture, you have culture among friends, a group of friends. Yeah.
I wish our friend Dara Marks was here tonight. You're talking about passing down culture as something that's passed down. She always likes to add the importance of myths to culture and storytelling to culture. And she likes to point out that myths and stories make passing knowledge down pleasurable. And it's, that's what makes us pass down our genetics as well. And so it's, one of the roles, of course, of myth from her point of view is to make sure that we go out of the way to pass down culture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing, by the way, Kate Loftus, traditions, celebrations, and expected behaviors. Deborah Nickel, alive, culture is alive, like Psyche. Thorin, I think culture is what we grow.
Nice. Thank you all for your participation. So it's fair to say that all the responses in the chat box can comprise someone's culture, but it's not an exhaustive list, right? It's just common elements of an individual cultural makeup, right? And defining the term culture yields many results, and producing one definition it's just a challenge, right? It's not like Dana said, it's complex. It's not this or that. It's not black and white. So I want us to think about, just because we have a definition for ourselves of what culture is, it doesn't necessarily mean that we understand a person's lived experiences. Next slide, please, Dana. So the image you see on the screen demonstrates how complex we are as individuals. Every person is a representation of a unique intersectionality that makes it impossible to pin down someone's culture just by looking at them or knowing portions of their life story. And this is key learning when considering becoming culturally responsive, because I'm all about, how do I respond instead of react to these things? So the assumption, and this is something that each and every person that's on this call is going to have to answer for themselves, right? When you look at me, what do you see? Are you telling yourself a story about who I am, what my culture is, where I come from, what my experiences are, how I might react or respond to people, places, things, and circumstances? Is there bias? Do you have a preconceived notion based on what you see in front of you?
Do you think that the questions, the biases that we're talking about are written into a particular culture, and so we inhabit them as children growing up in a particular culture, that the world has a certain way of being?
That is a great question, Dana. I'm going to ask you to move to the next slide, and I really do like that. So bring it back to the topic of African American, the African American, it's really hard, the Black community. Okay, let's just, hey, Jonathan, you knew it was coming, right?
I knew.
So when we're oblivious to someone else's intersectionality, it could mean that we're missing out on other parts of their identity. So that's a great question, Dana, but I don't know the answer to it because I'm multicultural, right? I am of the Igbo nation. I am Egyptian. Two brothers married, two sisters two brothers left Egypt, ran off to Amsterdam, married two sisters. So Devonna, you might not know this about Grammy, but those were Grammy's parents, right? So my grandmother was born totally albino, right? So there's that. There's the Egyptian, the Dutch, the Igbo nation. Then on my mother's side, my grandfather raised me, he was German Jew. They escaped the Holocaust. We talk about intergenerational trauma and we talk about culture and all this stuff and how we can sometimes take that on as children, right? I remember my great uncle with the numbers tattooed on his arm. And I remember he couldn't wear shoes because they had taken the hot pokers and put it through his feet. And you know, those are the people, that's where I was raised. But he was married to a woman who my great grandparents were married. They got married at 13. They were married for 85 years. So I always spent my summers on the reservation, right? He was a slave. She was Choctaw, right? I got good cross burning cousins in North Carolina because it's my family. My grandfather's people migrated from Germany to Raleigh, North Carolina. You couldn't be German Jew. You had to just be German because they had to survive because their lives were at stake. So that information gets passed on from generation to generation to generation because the fear of being found out. So you never know any of that about me and all the cultures that I was blessed to experience growing up. I know who I am. I know where I came from. I know how to fit into any. You never know that just by looking at me. So again, I just share that story so that people can think about, well, is there a preconceived notion about who Waynette is? A Black woman on the Myth Salon during Black History Month? That's not my identity. That's not how I identify myself, right? So is there bias? Is that a microaggression? I don't know. So being culturally responsive really means that we can remove the assumption that our knowledge is complete or perfect. We only know or perceive to know something based on the information that we have access to. So Dana, I don't know if it's something that's ingrained in us from childhood. I think it's going to be different for each and every individual.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It really does, but it also points to the fact, and I love that you brought up that term microaggression, because I remember the first time you used that around me, you just sort of dropped it like past the salt. You know, it was like just a word that was so familiar to you and obviously familiar to you and the people that you were sharing it with, that nobody else even bothered to ask for, well, what do you really mean by that? And I think, as I understand your use of it, is that there are these microaggressions that sort of creep into our behavioral patterns. And as we're talking with one another, there are gender biases that come out, there are race biases, there are biases of profession. You know, education can be something that we really have to overcome, that it stops us from, in many senses, being a regular person. And if we're not careful, we kind of outgrow ourselves in the process of becoming ourselves. And I think it's really useful for us to understand how our behaviors and our language impact one another.
Absolutely. I got one more slide and then I'm gonna shut the hell up and turn it over to the group.
Oh.
I just talked about that. I'm Black, but yeah. Yeah, I just talked about that one. So you can keep going. So I really want us to think about, even within our own cultures, whether that's your work culture, your family culture, your marriage culture, sibling, whatever. Two people, and this is common knowledge, two people can be raised in the same house by the same parents and have different experiences, right? It's just, that's right. I had a friend call me the other day, maybe it was a week or two ago. It's right after the insurrection. And, you know, she's an educated woman, she's a therapist, she's very, very, very intelligent. And she's part of my core group of supporters. And she said that she was not able to have conversations with her family around the insurrection because everyone has a different perspective. The question was, her question to me was, how can they believe this stuff? And again, it's like, these are people that were raised together, same parents, same household, but just different, they have different perspectives, right? And as I was talking to her, I really had to like break it down in terms of, this is how, and Will, you may be able to connect the dots here and use a different language than I'm going to use to connect the dots. So I'm really interested in your perspective on this. I took it like to the number 13, right? And Brad, I know you have a take on this because I've heard I know you and I know your story. The number 13 back in the 10th century was a lucky number, a number to be celebrated. The pagans, you know, the coven of 13 went 13. It was a great number until the organized religion came into play, and then they had to trample on, and then they made it bad, and people have bought into that. We as a society for thousands of years have bought into this myth, or under the illusion that the number 13 has negative consequences. I'm going to take it even a step further. we all know that the 14th floor is actually the 13th floor, but the elevator buttons don't have a 13. We all know when we get on an airplane and we sit in row 14, it's actually row 13, right? So people have like bought into this thing of 13 in buildings. And I lived in Asia, I lived in Japan for 2 years, and it's like number 4 was nowhere. So I'm like, okay, I get it. Okay, cool, whatever. 8's lucky and 4 is bad, but I was born on the 4th. So what now what? Right? So we bought into this as a society, right? And we took something that was magical for one group of people, the pagans, one culture, right? And we walked over them and I'm not going to say we, because I'm not the Pope or anything, but a whole community was destroyed. Sound familiar? Make America Great Again? Under the illusion that something's going to be taken from you, that the minority is now the majority, that the old Christian white men are now going to be the minority. And it's all about the marketing. Developers, my father was a developer. Developers buy into this and don't put a 13th floor. Because if they don't, then someone may not buy that building. Sound familiar? If we don't have equality, if we're not having conversations about culture and bias and how we're putting our beliefs into practice with each other, if we're not doing the right thing for the right reasons, are we going to lose our base? But when we don't vote our conscience, then we have an excuse, then we can, the culture, the division, right? So whether there's any validity to the negative consequences behind the number 13 or not, it's neither here nor there. But this is the culture of human beings buying into these beliefs that may or may not serve them. They may serve the few, but not the many, because there's a payoff in it for someone. So these things exist, and I'm really hoping that we all can, see the connections in between what's going on with the division in our country and how the beliefs that no longer serve us or serve few can contribute to marginalized groups and the disparities that we experience, and why they continue generation after generation after generation after generation, right? But I digress. But Will, I still want to hear your take on the number 13 and cultures and and how all that fits.
Oh, well, gosh, I mean, you just said so many profound things to go drop back into the silly numerology of 13. But, but the 13, I just think what you're saying is so true. We believe our stories and what's more influential, the story or the truth. And a lot of times the story is more influential, especially in a democratic society. And because what people choose to do is effectively what truth they're acting on. And, I was waiting to figure out, where the real synergy was going to be with the Myth Salon and with your organization. And I think it's really clicking for me that, those of us who are into mythology tend to believe something along the lines that myth is like the primary first front battle line for what our culture is going to be. that we're going to follow our culture, we're going to follow our stories, and we're going to pattern ourselves. We're going to repattern ourselves after the stories that we create. And so what you're talking about is really speaking our language, that, you know, it's the stories that we generate and that we buy into that shape our culture, right or wrong, true or false. And that's, you know, that just really stood out to me from what you're saying, one of the many things.
Nice. Thank you, Will.
But I will say Friday the 13th is when the Templars were killed.
Oh yeah, we know the Knights Templars. Yeah.
Friday the 13th. You know, that was where we got the scene from Star Wars when they sneak up behind all the Jedi and kill them all at once. That was the same thing they did to the Templars on Friday the 13th. That was that day. But, you know, 13, what if you really, I think what you're really looking at, if you look at a David star, two triangles, right? And 12 points. 13 is the center. So David's star is building out of the seed of life. So if you do one less round of dots around the outside, seed of life. You do one more round of dots around the outside, 19 points, flower of life. But 13 would be the center of this special pattern that you see on all the tombs or a lot of the tombs in Israel and all over the place. Celtic symbol, tree of life, seed of life. One of the things that seems to, you know, go across several cultures, but as 13, of course, also we're talking about the sequences of the moon, 13 lunar months. So we're talking about the lunar calendar versus the solar calendar, a lunar culture versus a solar culture. And we get into a super solar culture in the West that starts to kind of really demolish the months of the moon. And it is Lunar New Year right now, basically. So I think that's probably another big part of it.
We get his ass.
I know I had that in my notes, but I didn't bring it up. The Judas and the lunar. Yeah, woo! Thank you, Will.
You had me at the Star Wars reference.
Nice.
I had a twisted Friday the 13th background, but I better not put it up.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to end with, you know, cultural responsiveness is being able to appreciate the diversity, ask the questions, have the conversations, not thinking we know everything about people based on how they look. We can respond, we can know and see and celebrate and appreciate each other's differences. And eventually those values can spread to and influence organizations, systems, and nations, right? And it's a consistent journey. It's like, are we putting in the work on ourselves to be able to move it forward in our communities and with others? So as my friend asked me that question, you know, I just shared that information with her about how, you know, people buy into these belief systems and put them into practice. Because it takes a lot to unlearn. I'm 53 years old and I'm still unlearning. So with that, Jeff, you said you had to go early. I'm just going to open up to the Raw and Uncut group and whoever else. I'm going to open up to all the panelists to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, I do got to bow out a little bit early from tonight's festivities because I got another party to go to. But
well, sucks to be you, doesn't it?
I know, right? I really appreciate the conversation leading up to this, and especially the perspective that the information that is available to us helps to form our culture and our belief structure. And right now, we're dealing with something we really haven't dealt with before, and that is a mainstream source of information, several of them, that do not pride themselves in anchoring anything that they put out into reality or facts or even a firm foundation. And when people are receiving their news source from that and that alone, that is going to craft what goes on in their head and their decisions. And we saw it on January 6th. We saw a lot of people that did not come from the traditional red states, the deep South, that stormed that Capitol based on information that they had received, but were otherwise raised in geographical areas that we would more closely associate with liberal mindset and openness. I mean, there was a guy in San Francisco who was arrested for being at the Capitol on January 6th. It's like, dude, you live in the wrong town to be thinking like that. But you know, that mindset is really dependent on what type of information we're opening ourselves up for, and how much value we place on facts, on science, on truth. And that's a scary thought when you think that influence and how we're going to collectively form that culture. And by the way, I was thinking about my definition of what a culture is. It's basically, it's a community's identity as a whole, you know? And so where do we take that with a bunch of bad information being pumped into us, but being told to us as though it's gospel? I'll give you an example. There was one of my favorite liars, Tucker Carlson, the other night opened up a segment talking about the power outages in Texas. And he said, many people don't know this, but Texas a while back went all windmill energy. And now, because the windmills gave out, that's what's creating the power outage. He stated it with forceful confidence and authority, like this is what's happening and you need to know. And that's all the information that some folks in our community are hearing. They're not implementing, you know, a thought process that takes you to, you know, logical conclusions. It's Texas. What makes you think they're going to go straight renewable energy? It's the capital of fossil fuels. But he says it, he throws it out as though it's gospel, and then that starts a talking point that the Green New Deal or renewable energy is to blame for Texas having an energy crisis right now and their people suffering. So where do we go with that? How do we combat that level of professionalism and production value put on to absolute? Are we doing like real, raw, and uncut?
Yep, real, raw, and uncut.
Absolute bullshit. How do we combat that? You know, we put our own polished packages up on CNN, MSNBC. We look to ABC, CBS, and NBC as the middle of the road political discourse that we can draw information from. We'll look at BBC, Al Jazeera for non-slanted news as much as we think that we could possibly get. But if we're not searching for truth or validation from what we're hearing, and we're just believing what's told to us, where does that leave our community in 5, 10, 15 years? The crisis we have in the United States right now is 50% of the American people thought Donald Trump was good to go for another 4 years. And that's terrifying. When there's that level of, I don't want to call it ignorance because some of them are intelligent, but when there's that level of carelessness with the information that we're receiving and the information that we're taking as gospel and running with. So it's, and that affects every part of our national discourse, not just race. It affects gender identity. It affects political decisions across the board. That's a scary thought. So I would throw that out to the group. The question being, how fucked are we?
Well, Jeff, we have a bunch of friends that are educated and that we've known for decades and that are of that belief system, right? So again, is it, and that's back to Dana's point earlier, is it generational? If you're raised in segregation and you are taught early on that, and here, go on, Anissa, I'll go open up a window for you here. if we are raised with the belief, and it's been ingrained in us, that our life has greater value based on the pigmentation of our skin, based on the power that we have, and living through civil rights and all this other stuff, right? I mean, our friends aren't uneducated. They're not like my cousins in North Carolina. They ain't hillbillies. So I'm like, I was talking to my husband the other day. I was like, what are they afraid that the Latins and the Asians gonna take from them? They trailers? Don't nobody want they trailers.
And it's to the point, there's no shortage of valuable information that they have at their fingertips. And it's not like we're not telling them
every Saturday night.
But you look at what they post, you listen to what they say, you feel the defensiveness when you start bringing up something contrary to their belief structure. And so I don't get it. I don't think it's a regional thing. I don't think that it's a racial thing. Because I know I have a lot of Latinx friends that think Donald Trump walked on water. So it's a choice of the information they're receiving. And it's a willful decision to disregard any contrary information. And I don't know what to do with that.
You know, what I might suggest is, while willful, what parts of it are conscious and what parts are unconscious? You know, and I think that what Waynette's bringing up with identity is really interesting, where, you know, a couple things. One, where you were saying that we are all of our identities, you know, and all of these identities open us up. I think in our culture right now, that the United States, and you know, just one of my takes on what's going on is, we're in an identity crisis. And that identity crisis is, we have two different ways to arrive at what our identities are. And one of the ways we can arrive at what our identities are is like tribal. You know, these are the us. And that's, you know, we see that manifest in lots of ways. Another way that we can arrive at our identity is ideological. You know, these are my beliefs. And for those of us that see the United States as building an ideologically driven identity, you know, we believe this, and so that's what we are. We're the people who believe in democracy and freedom and equality and all that stuff. So if you're answering the question of who we are ideologically, then I think you arrive at one, you know, party. And if you answer it tribally, then I think that, you know, not only do you arrive in another party, but you also arrive in the landscape that I think we're in too. Yeah, and sorry, I saw Anissa, sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a third option, and that's morally.
Go on.
Yeah, like what like these are my morals, not my beliefs. I don't believe in ideology. I don't believe in socialism. I don't believe in capitalism. I don't believe in democracy over communism as a system of government. I don't, you know, because communism isn't a, you know, a market regulation system. It's a form of government. I go with my morals, like what I can live with. So I think that there's a third option.
You align those morals as with
your ethics, your morals, your ethics, your values, your principles. You know what, you know, those what you instinctually can align with, what you can live with, instead of your belief systems, and instead of an ideological belief guiding you. You know.
I totally agree. And I think especially when you look at all the identities that we can have, and, you know, when I was just meaning to focus on American, you know, where do we arrive at what it is to be American? And I think that that's why I say ideology, just because it's a belief system tied to the government, you know, and what the government's supposed to be. But I wonder how many of us identify first as American, and how many of us have identities that are
I identify as Arab American.
As Arab American.
I identify as victim of circumstance. It's interesting.
No damn victim.
you know, that moral code that you're talking about, that moral compass that comes into play, that's been kind of like a measuring stick for me over the past, you know, I'm going to say 12 years, because it really reared its ugly head back when Obama came into office. And it's, I use that as a measuring stick. Do we have political differences, or is there a fundamental different moral code that we operate off of? And it's, you know, do we call 151 of our fellow Texans and find out if we can get you help, or do we go to Cancun? So there's that fundamental moral code difference that really doesn't have anything to do with party affiliation or conservative versus liberal. We saw that on the last impeachment vote. You know, we saw some that identify as conservative, Republican, make a moral decision in how they voted, and man, they're paying the consequences right now.
How is a belief system and a morality, how are they different from one another?
The way that I see it.
Were you just using different words to saying the same thing?
I don't think so.
Say more about that. Tell me how your morality is not a belief system.
How your morality is not a belief system is usually guided by an external factor, like something is guiding it, like a religious structure or an ideology. Your morals are your internal guidance system.
Way to put it.
Okay.
Yes.
Don't they both?
Not necessarily, because what is written is not always moral.
Are beliefs written? Is that the way in which we're defining these two?
That's the way that I define it. I define beliefs as an external guidance system and morals as an internal guidance system.
Okay. As I say, I'll stipulate to that.
Yeah. In your terms first, yes.
Yeah, it just seems to me that whatever guides you, whatever gets you through the day, the closer it is to taking into account the broadest nature about how people ought to act, and using me as an example for that, is whatever the value system happens to be. You know, whether it comes out of compassion and love or difference or what have you, something is driving you into a way of being. And I think it's all internalized. I think both the belief system that you've acted out, it feeds into a morality that governs your behavior. And maybe a belief system is conscious, and it is something that you profess a certain set of beliefs, but those are something different than values. But at the end of the day, they all seem to motivate a group of behaviors that we have. And I think it's whether we're conscious and being mindful about how we're engaging everybody in the rest of the world. But I still see morality and beliefs having a tremendous amount of overlap. Yeah, it just.
Well, one of the things that Will was saying was like belief systems and ideological systems. So you may have a morality system that doesn't agree with democracy. That might just not be, you might be more in line with a parliamentary system, you know, which is, you know, some form of democracy, but it's not, you know, the same setup.
But if you don't adapt to the ideology of the culture in which you happen to inhabit, And I've found myself that way any number of times for any number of years. That doesn't mean I'm cognizant of the ideological system. I just don't buy into it. You know, the things that inhabit me, that I allow to grow and take on life within me, those become moral decisions and moral guidance. They're the compass that I use to, take me somewhere. And whether they're ideological or belief or moral or feeling or whatever they happen to be, they're the ones that I use. They're the ones that seem to have the most credence, with me as a person. So I'm looking for, how do we make a change in the culture such that one of the things that I shared with Waynette at the very beginning when we talked about her coming on this, because I knew if I could persuade her to come into this myth salon, that it would provoke a different myth salon than everybody's used to. And that offered some potential. So one of the things is, there was this article about a bunch of Black athletes who realized that they have this kind of like special role in the culture where they're kind of celebrated in a very public sort of way. But yet if they go down the street, they're just a Black guy walking down the street, and they can get harassed by the police. They can get discriminated in restaurants and what have you. There are people who will push them off the road and to the side, and yet they have this star potential in their lives. Well, what about people? I mean, why is there this dichotomy? Why is somebody treated one way in one part of their lives and in another part another way? Why can't that person be the recipient of compassionate behavior regardless of where they are?
Well, Dana, you're relying on the human condition, and Brad has a great spin on that, as does Wally. So I like them to kind of tag team on that.
Love
but
that.
The human condition. So we have someone in the chat box put ethics, right? So we have beliefs, right? We have beliefs that turn into our values. And we bought into these things. And then we have our ethics, which are our beliefs in practice. And that's going to be different from person to person to person to person. So it's like, are we having unrealistic expectations on how people should be? I don't like to should all over people. But do we have these unrealistic expectations of how people could be showing up in the world and treating each other? Again, one person at a time. What we aspire to do is to change the world, to look at our own shit so that we're not going out there and doing harm. The bottom line is to do no harm to myself first, because how I'm feeling about me dictates how I treat you. So you give me a badge and a gun and a uniform, I'm having a bad day, ain't no telling what's going to happen. I'm just keeping it real. And I talk about that in Raw and Uncut. There's a bunch of kids with the hoodies and the dreadlocks coming towards me in Silicon Valley, Redwood City, California. My body chemistry changes, my heart races. So I got my own damn biases. What am I afraid of? The insurrection, I cried because I knew if that was a bunch of Black people coming at, I watched that damn police officer crying, talking about he got kids and he want to go home and see his children. And I'm looking at this man and I'm like, if that was a mob of Black people coming at you, y'all, they'd have been locked and loaded and everybody looked like Swiss cheese. So again, familiarity, and it's your own kind coming at you. Why do you see me as a goddamn threat? I know I got bricks, but they're made of foam. Keep them because I have choices and options on whether I choose to use them. This reminds me I never have to do harm. My choice. But again, we're relying on the human condition, human experiences. Why is it that what happened at the Capitol happened, because if it would have been us, it'd be a whole different story. So Brad, I'm going to break your little, I'm going to disclose. So we have people recovering from racism that have eliminated those beliefs that no longer serve them, and Brad is one of those people. So Brad talks about how he put those beliefs into practice, what the turning point was for him when he changed that behavior. And then he also talks about the pilot program in the Caribbean for slavery, and how generation upon generation has been desensitized to African American oppression, right? Hey, Brad, I'm get off my soapbox. Put my brick away. Put my brick away.
Get off your soapbox.
I'm on one because I see Texas on fire with the fire hydrant. Never mind. Shut up, Waynette.
Shut up, Waynette.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Coretta.
Yes, yes. My name is Brad. I live in Lubbock, Texas. And so just miles north of ERCOT, ERCOT, electrical grid. And so they just tell us back and forth, we may and may not be affected. We have not been affected yet. But everybody south of us, whenever I talk to them, they're talking about the actions that need to be taken right here, right now, to get through the next hour, to get through the next half of the day. And there's just that emptiness that says, they never speak about it, but it just says, I've been hurt, and I'm not going to cooperate with being hurt again. Who is it? Maya Angelou says that people will not remember what you said or what you did. They will remember how you made them feel. And these people have been made to feel abandoned, endangered, in affluent, in affluent communities. And so it's something's changing. Something's changing. Texas has actually always teetered on being some kind of purple. I think this is going to change something. But personally, I've got a cat that's losing his mind outside my bedroom door. And being annoying because he's like, for sure that life is better in here than out there. But it's like one of my personal lenses that I see life through is that of a recovering substance abuser. A long time, and I had always I grew up in the area I live. I grew up in a very small town. Bring yourself in here. There now, I can think.
Show your
Follow the advice and let the cat in, huh?
I was going to say something totally inappropriate. And Dana is filming and never.
Yeah.
I better go back to mute.
Oh, good. You've seen my dog.
Yes. But so being a recovering person is one of the things I see life is one of the lenses that I see life through. And I'd always known that racism was not anything I wanted to participate in. Grew up in a small West Texas town, being the gay kid. And so people would maybe they knew, maybe they didn't, but many times in my life, I'd be sitting in a group. No one would be aware of my sexuality, and I was part of the group. And I had the protections and security of the group. And then suddenly my sexuality would be known. And all of that went away. I was alone. I did not have protection. I was an available target for anybody who wasn't having a good day. And so it's like that right there. I quit it. I could see the commonality of that with racism. And I always wanted to like not support racism and not be a part of it, but it took more than just wanting. One of the guys that I sponsor is 10 years older than I. He and I were doing a lot of writing on a subject, and we found memories of being little white boys in West Texas being taught by our mothers and our grandmothers how to uphold the system of racism, what we were supposed to do and not do. And so we both just really seriously went into writing and journaling and hunting. And before the whole process is out, we were just appalled that we had been treated that way, that you were trying to turn a little kid into the kind of warrior that would keep the aggression rolling and going. I'll let you in. Why are you still hollering? Because you're going to holler. Went ahead and then it's like I got involved with Waynette's microaggression thing, and I kept looking at it and was like, use the tools that I'd been taught in recovery to dig back into the past and find all those where I made a decision as a child and how that decision has never been revisited until I'm today years old, and how I want to look at it differently, make a different decision about whatever that life occurrence or situation pops up. This will be my response. So to me, I see it as something that is taught. It's like, did my dad say anything or blink an eye whenever I said, yes, sir, Mr. Brookins? No, that was appropriate. Did my mother say, we don't say yes, sir to black men? Yes, she did. Whenever I found a wonderful song, and I was like, just being happy about it, my grandmother's the one who had to say something about it being race music and stuff. I noticed that our voting came down to 52% or something of the white women deciding to side with the racist. I think that's significant. But the thing is in South Texas, we have a lot of these white women who are no longer feeling safe, who no longer feel like they are, being taken care of, that their needs are met, and that they can count on having what they need to get through today, tomorrow, next week, that they'll have what it takes to provide for the health and well-being of their children. The other thing is that I've noticed is that there is this big change happening in society, in that no longer are the dominant voices the voices of white men. It's becoming much more the women, and that is upsetting a lot of men, because I'm supposed to be in charge, and if I'm in charge, I don't have to be responsible for my bad behavior. I can get some passes and get away with stuff, but if I'm not in charge, I'm going to have to be responsible for my actions. But A lot of people don't think that through, and they just see the changes. They just see the changes, and that scares them. And so somebody like Tucker Carlson gets on TV and starts saying, hey, instead of being scared, let's be angry. And they just all get together and have a little anger party. And I think that that's what's steering them, is that it's just they're playing with their anger. And instead of having somebody that they'll listen to who's saying, okay, this is how we move through. This is how we deal with the changes. This is how we support each other. This is how we share success. This is how next week we're going to be better, next month even better, next year better, 10-year mark, we have grown this thing. No, we have these voices that are talking to them. They're saying, hey, are you scared? Would you like to be angry about that? We could all be angry about that and use a bunch of angry words. Until we finally have a bunch of these stupid yabos that take it beyond words and are running around in our federal capitol dressed up like who knows what and scaring people, acting out, just being bullies, of which I'm very much of the opinion that we have better ways of educating each other and directing our society other than based on who is the biggest bully. And so and if we can manage to raise our children on some other system other than who's the biggest bully, we're going to end up with fewer, the kids taking less damage, the kids having fewer mental health issues turned on, kids having fewer reasons to go try to deal with life by filling themselves full of chemicals. Kids, just being able to be there in the middle of their life and be there and enjoy it. So I am all over the place with all of this, but for me, it's a big connection thing. Got to get back, because I forgot to say this, but Waynette did it, brought it to me. Years ago, two of my dad's cousins, two women, they said, oh, we're going to research the family tree. We are going to find that we are descendant from famous people. Next family event, a couple years later, they weren't saying anything. They were quiet. Finally, a bunch of the family pigeonholed them and said, what is going on? What did you find out about our family tree? And they didn't want to share because they couldn't say we came from some kind of grandiose European situation. They said that we were the poor white trash that got off the boats and had the jobs, sitting on the horses, abusing the black people and forcing them into back-breaking labor. And I'm like, it goes way back there. In all of this, I end up reading and such and hunting through books and all, and find out that the Europeans were just so infatuated with sugar. They needed sugar production. So they rolled out a system to produce sugar on the Caribbean islands. And part of that system was slavery. And on those Caribbean islands, you had two groups of people. You had the white people and the black people. The black people were being taught to be slaves, and the white people were being taught to be indifferent to atrocities, period. Not just atrocities. They could not be trained to only ignore atrocities against black people. They could only be trained to ignore atrocities as a category. And so then after they perfected this system, they exported it to South America and North America. This is a piece of slavery that's still going on. Yes, people have officially been freed, But nobody turned around to the white people and said, hey, how do we free you from being blind to atrocities? How do we make you sensitive to what's going on in the world around you? How do we make you the kind of father that's going to notice there's something wrong with your son? Something's happening at school. You need to get in there and step in there and find out. How are you going to be able to be the kind of husband that notices whenever your wife comes back and she seems a little bit upset and you ask what's going on and she says, oh, I'm fine? To know she's not fine. You need to go in there and find out. Instead, because you're just so dulled, trained to be dulled and ignore atrocities, you're not able to protect your family, your wives, your children. And so it's like, if we can free white people from the training of slavery, each individual white person's life will benefit and grow and become more than it was. And if they're not immune to atrocity, they will not consider it a common behavior to beat the hell out of their children, maybe. So it's just this cycle of abuse that is just everywhere. And I only know about it because I worked so hard to change each little piece and part of me. You know, I sat there and gained a safe spiritual space. And then I started writing, and I was told to explore my morals, my personal morals. And then to look at, am I living up to them? And I go through this process and and I find so many things that I picked up from my family of origin, from my experiences growing up, from my society, that I don't want to carry forward and I don't want to put any more energy into. And I live in the middle of Trump country. I mean, people drive up and down the streets with their little Trump flags on their trucks. And I asked him, I said, is that keeping you warm here in the middle of the snow, all those wonderful little flags? They look at me and usually wave with one finger. But I don't think that I need to let them be as just unquestioned as they think they need to be. I do not think I'm doing them a favor. I don't think that I'm helping them keep their families safe. Ta-da. I think I've rambled on long enough.
Brad, you brought up an absolutely beautiful point. And that was, and I've always said, you know, systemic racism isn't a Black person's problem, it's a white person's problem. And we have to be a part of that solution. And when you spoke about how do we free that perspective and that my words all the time. It's late in the day. I'm tired. How we get rid of that desensitizing that we have about the atrocities, you know, and how do we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to show that vulnerability that we are emotionally impacted by something. You know, LAPD right now is in a ton of hot water because over the Valentine's Day, many of the officers were circulating a Valentine meme that was George Floyd being kneeled on with the caption, "You take my breath away." And they thought that was funny, or that was okay, or that was just their dry, warped sense of humor or whatever. But somebody within their ranks was appalled enough that they made it an issue. Thank God. Because that level of vulnerability to look at outrage and say, this is wrong, even in the face of a system that you're a part of. Somebody earlier asked a question about fear and how does that play into our culture and our development of our society. And it takes a lot of strength and bravery to say what I thought I knew, what collectively I have a belief that was taught to me by everybody around me. To be willing to say that's not right is an incredible amount of courage. You know, and for those of us in recovery, we've kind of learned to fearlessly go forward in the world when we work that fifth step and the power of our secrets is taken away. So now it's like, fuck it, I'm going to overshare at every meeting. I'm going to tell everybody anything because what could possibly happen to me, right?
Oh, yeah.
Except when you run into a mob that thinks differently than you, or you work within a field that has a different culture. And yeah. So, I mean, you broke out. I learned stuff about you I never knew before. I thought you were just a fellow Star Trek, Star Wars nerd. And you are.
Yes, very much.
That's because you joined Raw and Uncut after Bradley presented.
I got to split, y'all. Thanks for the invite. Sorry I can't be here to hear the rest of the collective wisdom that's being broken off here tonight. I think I'm going to be missing out. Are you recording this, Waynette?
I'm not.
It
Dana is.
recorded.
It is?
Yeah.
Dana, will you make sure I somehow get a copy of it?
No, I'm going to send it to everybody, your mom, your brothers and sisters. But
I fearlessly go forward.
Yeah.
My mom knows way more than I want her to know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nope. It'll go out there. And, but what we're bringing up is really the multiplicity of the voices, and that everybody, and what I liked about your Raw and Uncut was everybody has a voice, and that voice has validity. And the voice is saying something that every voice is like a tip of an iceberg, and it's got something underneath it that has a whole individual life experience and a cultural life experience and a family life experience. I mean, this thing, just the deeper you go, the more you find out we're all really connected. And this commonality that we share underneath the water is when we get down to that point where we understand that I am you, that's when we can make a change and it can go forward, because we can develop empathy for one another. We can develop cultural understanding, and we can find that in our divisions, there's commonality, and the divisions then become coincidences. They don't become fences and barriers and walls. So let me invite my friend Zaman in.
I just texted Wally a question from a panelist. Can I give Wally the opportunity to respond to the question,
Wally,
please?
why don't you go? I didn't see the question.
I did a private chat to Wally.
I don't typically monitor the chat that goes along because I'm sitting here trying to do this stuff.
Nice.
And I
just want to extend an invitation
before.
to Wally to respond to that question.
All right.
And then I'd love to hear from the other panelists.
Yeah, let's do that. Wally, welcome, my brother.
Thank you. I'm going to come from a place of my inner child. Does anyone know how our children are doing? You don't have to give me your right answer right now. But I've listened to my friend Jeff. He's gone. He has another party to get to. I think that's what I heard him say. I heard some comments from Will, certainly from Brad and others. as a child, my inner child, like they used to say, you're to be seen and not heard. And I listened to this truth, the will, my interpretation. Yeah, we know it's not the truth. But accept it anyway. I remember Stokely Carmichael in 1964. Mike Wallace was interviewing him. And he responded to Mike that the American government doesn't have a conscience. He was speaking from the practices of 1864, the 1860s. And here we are 50 years later with those same practices as though we are children. Just accept it. It isn't about the facts, which is what Jeff kept speaking to. I even recall Will in his narrative speaking about the I and the us. I never heard we. Democracy for who? That's why many African leaders say, oh yeah, we like democracy, but we don't like your type of democracy. America for who? We the people. Who in the hell is we in the Declaration of Independence when I'm 3/5 human from your interpretation of me being a human being? I listened to that poem again and it brought tears to my eyes because the inner child in me lives. It coexists with my manhood. If we continue to play these games of mediocrity, that a lie is an acceptable norm, that's like telling me that Santa Claus is coming tomorrow night at midnight, and I'm a grown-ass man. Stop perpetuating that which divides us. The name Satan means divide. Stop the division. Oneness of humanity. The we in America is the acceptance of our differences, not just what we have in common. And not tolerating our differences, but accepting. There's a big difference between tolerant and acceptance, even if you don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
With our limited understanding, be in acceptance. Stop perpetuating division. As our dear friend Ellen would say, someone benefits when we write books and literature of racism. There's a benefit for that. Sublimity of subduction. There's a benefit for that. Continuing the narrative. There's a benefit from that. And the beneficiaries is not the commoner of the we. I'm a sensitive man. What are we afraid of losing? Like Waynette would say, somebody's gonna come and take your trailer. Someone's gonna take your job. What are you afraid of? Human consciousness. I'm much bigger than what you see on this screen. And I'm not who you see on this screen, like you don't know what you see when you look at Waynette, and neither do I know you. But there's one thing that connects me with you or whenever I am outside of America, and that is the human soul. And that is one. And that's the way an innocent child lives life, from the human soul. Not all up in the head. They're separated from the heart. As I've shared before, the first organ that is developed in human life is the heart. We were talking last week about the tendencies of caring. It's in both men and women. Let us be courageous. Let us be comfortable with the complexity of systems. Let's be comfortable with it. Because we live in complex systems that are constantly changing, unpredictable, full of uncertainty. We can't run away from it, but we can learn to embrace that which is a discomfort. And if we have some fears, that's okay, because coexisting with fear is possibility, and embrace them both. And then take moral action. First, believing in yourself, and then the others. I believe in people. All they bullshit, I believe in that too. But it doesn't control me. I'm not afraid of white privilege. I'm not afraid of it. So please, the only difference between a child and an elder is responsibility. Let's us take this opportunity to be responsive to human renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
The human renaissance. Again, Brad, we missed you last week, but we were talking about South America. Africans was there 100,000 years ago. Like they were here over 51,000 years ago. That's not a myth. That's factual. We are one human family from one human soul. That's not being so spooky. Ain't nothing spooky about that. I remember Selena when I was here when Clyde was speaking. And I think you asked, what can I do as a white woman? I never know if you got your answer or not.
Yeah, but I still want to learn more. And this is something, something that I wanted to bring up to the group because I struggle with this. I have some colleagues and they're, super professional women, and I've done my work in terms of diversity, and I will continue because it's an ever evolving situation. But sometimes my Caucasian colleagues, and they're like well-educated, I bring something up and they say, I'm not racist, or I'm not this, I'm not that. Oh, I don't have any of that bias, none. And I'm like, well, I do, because I know what my biases are. I embrace everybody, but I'm human, and I'm part of the process, but I've worked on it, and other people have not, and they deny it. and I go crazy on them because I don't know how to wake them up. And anybody who wants to bring this up, how do I wake up some people that I know, some colleagues, some of my friends, about bias?
That's a big question. You know, I come from a practice that we cannot be the spokesperson for another human being. We're on this Mother Earth, as some of us refer to as a heroic journey. Maybe it's not time for them to wake up. Maybe they're just taking a nap. Maybe somewhere a few days from now, they'll wake up. Because I can remember my own journey. And I was a damn fool once upon a time. And someone tapped me on the elbow and said, wake up. It may not be their time. They may not be chosen. And they may have been chosen and refused to choose back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've never heard it said from that perspective, but I really appreciate that. I really do. Thank you, Wally, from the bottom of my heart. That really touched me.
There are so many people. Some of them are right here. And I believe that they're in alignment with you. And maybe the right-minded and like-minded humans that you see right here can create that critical mass. Not just change the state of California or America, but be part of this global wave that's saying hell to the no. No more discrimination.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the goal.
Cheryl, and all you other wonderful people, Coretta, as you know, I'm going to pass the mic. But I really was touched when I heard Will speak, and that's just the way it is. I was in the Harvard University of Islamic Law about 30 years ago in Malaysia. And when the professor said to me, who's now the dean, this field is the practice of adversary. I said, adversary? It's not about the facts. It's who has the best story. The following year, I withdrew from that university because that does not speak to my morals. That does not speak to my values. I'm here to be a mufti to create understanding based on science. So to live in a legal system, as we have seen time and time again in America, is not based in facts, preferences, biases. It's just the way it is. Just go along so you can get along, have some friends, pay your mortgage, take a vacation. Don't rock the boat. We love Nelson Mandela, or are we willing to be courageous, Are we willing to deal with this inner war that we're having with our own selves? Stop fighting with ourselves, Wally. Stop fighting with yourself. If you don't like what you're seeing, then change your interpretation of the facts. Wally. I pass the mic.
Either Voris or Zaman, I'd like to hear from both of you today. If you, either one could care. I see Zaman's wanted to say something for a while, and Voris has got, Zaman, you want to go ahead?
I think in a way, if you look at the value system in general, values that are universal are generally not part of a belief system. These are golden truths that everyone in any culture believes in. I mean, for instance, honesty, because that's a universal value, that's a moral value. Certain values that are culturally defined become parts of a culture and a tradition and a religion and so on and so forth. And so that's one thing. The things that there are some people who take their beliefs and they use morality as a cover up for that. They use that as a cover to present it that, oh, because morality is universally accepted truth, and therefore I'm presenting my personal belief system, but I'm not going to say that it's my belief, rather that it's my morality. Those two words don't go together. My morality has to be universal. And I think part of this also has to do with more of our, in the historical context, that in the old world, cultures were defined geographically. In a particular valley, city, town, whatever. And so people didn't feel threatened if someone moved to their neighborhood. They were just like, they had to blend in. When they came to America, here that geographic rigidity was no longer. And so there was a degree of competitiveness. And in this competitiveness, some people felt threatened. A secondary element was that the European aristocracy was in the Latin world. They went to Latin America, to the south and to the north. Those were the aristocrats. And the poor indentured laborers came to what is the United States. And that brings the next question of the victim becomes the victimizer. And then the system that is established is one, not necessarily one of difference, but one of disparity. So when you want the system to continue as is and don't rock the boat and accept the difference, what they mean is accept the disparity, accept the difference, accept the deprivation. And because, like I said, part of that victim becoming the victimizer, part of it would have been a social class, color, race, all that. But part of it was economic also. And because they did not have enough, so then they had to get to that level. So once you get to this level of where there's all kind of all values from all around the world that comes, then sometimes they could be an issue of the clash of cultures. Sometimes it could be just kind of the compatibility. For instance, in Chinese culture, if someone's wife betrays them, they put a green hat on that person for a certain period of time to embarrass him because he was betrayed by his wife. That's when you wear a green hat. Well, just imagine on St. Patrick's Day, the Irish Americans parading through Chinatown in New York. And everybody's laughing, but they are not all laughing for the same reason. because there are certain cultural baggages that make that laughter for, let's say, the Chinese Americans, it means one thing. And the Irish Americans are saying, just look, even these Chinese Americans are so happy at St. Patrick's Day. They are laughing for a different reason. So I think what we have to understand is that, yes, the system is there, but the system is not necessarily one of difference, but one of disparities. And also the issue of threat is there. Certain people feel threatened. And who feels threatened? If you have taken something from someone, you feel threatened because they're going to come after it. They will take it back. And so if you have denied certain people certain civil rights and certain liberties, and if you have denied them their humanity more than anything, you feel like they're going to come after it. And so that's why when people feel threatened, it depends on who you are, on which side of the, I don't know if I can even call this an equation. So I think those are the things that we have to consider, that yes, values are there, beliefs are there, but it's the universality. And they should not be culturally defined, so we can use it either as a cover to hide our own, skewed beliefs, or to use it as a justification that, well, I'm doing this because it's my moral value, and therefore I have the right to do so. And in the interest of time, I yield. Thank you.
All right. Boris, how about you jump in? We've certainly unlocked the beast today, and I think it's turned into a really powerful discussion. And it's the kind of thing that can really go on because it's not resolved. And I would say one thing, that Wally, you may not be afraid of white privilege, but I am. And I will say that this is something that is deeply troubling to me as a white person in a white culture, that because I blend in that way, there are a huge number of assumptions that people make about me that just aren't who I am. And I get associated with things that don't have anything to do with me or my values. And those people who know me know what I'm talking about. And so as a result, it makes me angry that that stuff's out there. I don't like it, and I don't support it, and I try to counter it at every turn in the road. So I thank you for bringing that up, but let's, Boris, jump in.
Sure, thanks, Dana. I guess where I want to begin is what Zaman said. I think it's a good point to have a kind of continuing stream conversation. His notion of that folks are laughing, but they aren't laughing for the same reason. As mythologists, and that's where I want to kind of take this, mythologists aren't against facts, right? I've heard it said a couple of times where there's myth versus facts. Mythologists aren't against facts. Mythologists understand that the fact that people are laughing does not mean they're laughing for the same reason, right? So for me, it takes me back to Joseph Campbell, his notion that myth is not about living a meaningful life. It is the experience of living meaningful lives, okay? And anti-Blackness, which is structural, not incidental, and anti-women, or feminine, which is also structural, keeps folks from living a meaningful experience in the way that they would want. So what do I mean by that? those folks in the insurrection, those folks are a group of people for whom the American myth is no longer working. The myth of America, the American dream, is falling apart at the edges, right? In terms of employment, and folks want an answer. And what myth can do is provide meaningful responses to that make facts carry more weight. In other words, what I said earlier applies. What people are struggling here are not over beliefs and values merely. They are struggling over contrasting notions of what is reality. And an appeal to a fact does not work when you're talking to someone about their reality. It just doesn't. And I think a prime example of that is Selena just pointed out, I'm sorry, that she goes talks to some very intelligent and thoughtful women who are very well educated. And by the way, let me pause. In Toni Morrison's Beloved, she and today would have been her 91st birthday. She saves her most virulent critique of white anti-Blackness, not for slaveholders, not for folks who were patty rollers, et cetera, et cetera. She said the most vicious critiques for a school teacher, for educators. Okay? So that said, when Selena argues with these, and she makes her point, there's nothing else to say after that because their education actually gets in the way of them hearing what's going on. So I think the response to that, Selena, is simply, we have, and I do it all the time. When I say to someone that that's just racist and they say I'm not, then I just say, well, we have different opinions about what the notion of racism is, and I just move along. And so to me, myth becomes vitally, vitally important because myth gives substance to our daily experience. So it's not myth versus facts. As a matter of fact, let me make it clear. Facts do not equal truth. They never have. Facts do not equal truth. An excellent book for this, and it's not an academic book, is by Brooke Gladstone, The Trouble with Reality. And she says the problem with reality is that most of us think that there's reality out there, and then we engage that reality with our values, traditions, etc. She says, no, we have it backwards. We'd have to be a god to do that. In actuality, reality is what happens after we engage our ideologies, our passions, our desires, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So methodology then is vitally important because it has, as I've heard a kid say, a myth is a lie on the outside, but the truth on the inside, right? So I could go on, but this time is up. So let me start with this. What I've loved about what I've heard is, what we're arguing here for is the heretical, for ways to be otherwise in the world, ways to be human in the world. And what we have to deal with, as Sylvia Winter talks about, is that the notion of the human condition excludes too many people. And that has to be challenged. So I'll end with this. The heretical scripture that changed my life is the Gospel of Thomas, which during the Council of Nicaea, the official church exiled. And when I tell you what it is, you'll know why, because it removes power from the church and brings it back to the individual. And it simply says, it's verse 70, if you bring forth that which is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth that which is within you, that which is within you will destroy you. And if we can do that, that's where the change begins. And that's why it's important to not only do political change and social change, but to talk to counselors, right? To psychologists, to other people who can help you wrestle with your own demon, right? because the essence of American race, anti-Blackness, the heart of darkness, in my view, is that white folks don't want to admit to their privilege, and Black folks don't want to admit to how we are complicit. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Beautifully said, Boris.
And can I jump back real quick?
We're
Look at my daughter.
We're
I
up
know you got
against
hands.
it.
Oh,
and
yes.
I just want to take us out with a moment of silence. I want to thank you, Waynette, for accepting the invite to come in here and bring everybody from Raw and Uncut. And you did put it in the chat box, I believe, that where they can come in and join in a Raw and Cut session. I will say exposure and friendship with people who are not redundant to who we happen to be heals. It makes us whole. It puts us in touch with something much deeper than ourselves. So I want, as I do with going in with a moment of silence, there are people who really need our thoughts today. There are people who are living without family and friends who have been affected by the coronavirus, and we're at 500,000 people who have died in the last year. There are people who are freezing their asses off down in Texas. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like without power, and not having any place to go. I don't know what you do. Break out the down sleep.
You make do, Dana.
Yeah.
You've never been on the reservation, huh?
Yeah, well, I've always had.
Do.
So just give me a moment of silence, please, and let's. Thank you all for a wonderful, complex, chaotic, substantive evening. Will, thank you very much for being my partner in this. And just, I love this group. I love what we're doing. Jonathan, wonderful to see you here tonight. Devana, we'll get you next time. We'll do it. Thank you. But we're up against the clock, and thank you all very much. So good night.
Thank
That's
you,
all
everybody.
right, baby. You show up tomorrow. You can say what you need to say.
I will. You show up too, please. I'll be there.
I'm talking to my daughter.
Yeah, well, I'm talking to your daughter too.
She has a young perspective. We need to hear from the young people on this subject, right?
Yeah,
please.
Okay, I was taking notes. So.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, all. Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Be well, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
thanks
Have a
for having
wonderful
me.
evening.